Okay, next. This is the final session of the virtual summit this year. And we are going to hear from Ingrid Palmer and Rome Lim. They will share their insights on workplace accommodations and disclosure. We center the voices of people living with episodic disability because it is vital in shaping inclusive policy and practices in the workplace. So to introduce Ingrid, who uses she, her pronouns, she is an award-winning speaker, best-selling author, and holds the position of principal ideal advocate at Realize. Ideal stands for inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, leading to belonging. As a visually impaired former foster kid, Ingrid is committed to combating discrimination in all its forms, as well as driving systemic change and debunking myths of stigmatized identities. Ingrid's dedication is deeply rooted in her living experiences of early childhood trauma, foster care, disability, and gender-based violence. Rome Lim, whose pronouns are he, him, is a writer and photographer born in the Philippines, raised in so-called Canada, specifically in the city of Hamilton. What Rome is most fulfilled by is empowering marginalized youth across Canada through mentorship, creativity, storytelling, and cultural knowledge sharing. Over the past 4 years, Rome has been part of Pinoys on Parliament, Canada's first and largest national Filipino youth conference. Rome's latest venture is starting his own photography business, House 98 Productions, which he intends to grow into a fully-fledged multimedia company in the near future. Welcome to the summit, Ingrid and Lim. It's wonderful to have you here. I would like to invite Rome, because right now I can see his face, to start us off, if that's okay, or perhaps we had other expectations. No, is that okay, Rome?
No, that is perfectly okay.
Okay,
Are we?
thank you.
I'm just talking about myself. Sorry, just.
That's exactly it. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll invite Ingrid to do that when you're done. And then we'll try and have a little bit more of a discussion. I invite folks to engage with this, ask questions. I have a few, but if there are more from other people, I will ask those first. Over to you, Rome.
All right. Thank you so much, Melissa. So, as Melissa said, my name is Rome. I am a business owner and photographer. House 98 Productions is my current photography business. And I am focused on sharing the stories of marginalized people in my community through photographs and other visual mediums. And as an audible description of myself, I am wearing a brown button up top with cream floral embroidery. I have a medium brown skin tone and short black hair. And I am also sitting in a light yellow room with some posters in the background. And yeah, so my kind of, I wouldn't say struggle, but more so my kind of dance with my episodic disability didn't come to me until much later in my life. So my disability is anxiety. I have generalized anxiety, and I've come to learn that I've had it for a majority of my life. But it wasn't until maybe sometime last year that I realized that having a mental health issue can be considered an episodic disability. So in the past year since then, I've come to understand how my anxiety shows up in my relationships, in the workplace, and also, in my just in my everyday life. A little bit about my career path is I went to school for journalism at the University of Toronto, and I graduated during COVID, which was a very difficult time, obviously, for everybody. But for me, I, was really excited to get into the workforce because I graduated with a perfect GPA, and my profs always told me how talented I was and how I was an amazing storyteller. So, you can imagine I was bright and sprightly to send in my applications, and, the industry was not ready to take on new people at that time. And then I also, you know, started to feel like the news industry, news media as a whole was not ready to accept someone like me, right? So it gave me a lot of anxiety, about where my life was going in terms of my career because, growing up as a Filipino, what you're told is that if you do really well in school, you will secure a stable career and a stable job, and then your life will be set. So it's a very linear path, and so I was not ready to tackle this non-linear way of life after graduation, and so you know I kind of um, moped around a little bit. I was very sad that I was not getting any offers after university, and no one was responding to um, my job applications. So a friend reached out to me and said, "Hey, Rome, have you heard about this thing called Pinoys on Parliament?" And I said, "No, not really, but I'm not interested in working in the government or anything political in that way." And, she was like, "Oh, don't worry. It's really not about politics. It's more so just planning this conference." And I said, "Okay, I'll take the chance. I'll take the chance to do that." And so, I joined Pinoys on Parliament as a media relations coordinator. And from then on, I moved my way up to director of communications. And I learned a lot of amazing skills through helping to promote this conference to young Filipinos across Canada. Um, but in that time, I was still battling with my anxiety, trying to understand, who I was within its borders, right? So in terms of the workplace, like I don't know, Melissa, if maybe you'll ask about this later, but just kind of talking about disclosing my anxiety in the workplace, I never had to do that because I didn't have the language to do so. Um, but it wasn't until, I came to accept it that, um, you know, I realized, okay, this is how I am in the workplace, and it explains all the kind of like feelings I had about jobs that were really not strenuous at all. They were more so very like, just for a lack of a better term, like chill. I've had jobs where I would just sit at a desk and do the things I knew that I could do, but very much still I was anxious to do those things. Um, and yeah, I'm really excited to talk about those things further. But I don't want to take any time away from Ingrid because I know that I love to talk. So please, Melissa, take it away to Ingrid.
Thanks so much, Rome. It was great to have just a little introduction to who you are before we dive into questions. Ingrid, I'm going to ask you to unmute and turn your camera on if that's possible.
Hi,
Ingrid. Hi.
I've been trying. It said the host wouldn't let me.
Oh, no.
Let me see if I can get my camera. My camera is not coming on. I still get the message that it says the host will not let me start my video.
Oh, that's so
So
strange.
let me, oh, start my video.
Oh, okay. There we
Am
go.
I on? Okay,
How about
awesome.
that? Great. Ingrid, over to you.
Technology is not my strong suit, folks. So thank you so much for your patience, and thank you to my team for your support with that. Yeah, hi everybody. I also would like to share my story. Thank you, Rome, for your strong share there. I really appreciate that. I live with different episodic conditions, which do include gout and arthritis, but I wanted to talk to you today about a condition I live with called retinitis pigmentosa. Retinitis pigmentosa. I'll just refer to it as RP from now on to save the interpreters, all that spelling. And RP is a degenerative eye condition. And I know that visual impairment is not something that we would think about when we're talking about episodic disability. And so I'll explain about that. RP is a rare condition, and as rare conditions do, they don't present in traditional ways. And so with RP, the UVA and UVB rays of the sun are like acid on my retinas. And so my retinas, my whole life, have been in a constant state of deterioration. And that means that my vision has also been in a constant state of change and flux. The other conditions of RP include night blindness, because my pupils don't dilate or constrict in different lightings like most people's do. And so trying to navigate the difference between sunlight and shade, something as simple as turning my head to the left or the right, stepping forward or stepping back throughout my life would be a really big impairment to how I saw. It would completely shift how I saw in different lightings, even on the inside. Sometimes I could see people, and other times people would just be what I would term shadow people, which means I would basically just see the whole of you as a dark shadow, and that would be dependent on where both of us were in relation to light. The other aspect of RP is tunnel vision. So I had tunnel vision, which meant that I tripped over things a lot. I banged my head and I would bang the sides of my body against edges of things and doorways because my vision is not as wide to the sides or up and down as most people. And that also meant for me at a certain period in my life that people would just pop into being, which you can imagine is very startling. So I would just jump. And so that was another thing that kind of had me people thinking that she is so strange and weird, but that was a real thing for me. The other thing is that because of the severity of the tunnel vision, I lacked depth perception. So things like stairs just look like lines on the floor to me. Things like, say, a pothole would just look like a spot on the ground. And so navigating the world for me could be very dangerous since the world was very flat for me. I literally would walk full force into huge pillars and really large objects that people would think that's impossible to do. I would walk into doors instead of through doorways because I couldn't actually tell sometimes where the opening was. I could do something silly like try to pick a flower out of a picture because I would think that it was a real vase with flowers. I could try to pet a sweater thinking it was someone's cat. And I could sit on people that were sitting on furniture or chairs because I wouldn't be able to tell that someone was sitting there. So you can imagine that throughout my life, I was considered quite odd. The other thing is that 3D, that we have in the movies has never worked on me on my eyes. But in real life, um, people would sometimes emerge out of furniture for me, which would totally freak me out. So you can imagine that navigating the world for me was like an everyday slapstick comedy. I literally felt like the fourth stooge, and so did other people. So I was perceived as a pretender, as somebody who just wanted to perhaps milk a condition because they just couldn't believe that when I said I didn't see things that was actually true. So you can imagine that disclosure for me, both personally and in the workplace, was a real difficult thing to navigate. I have been working or volunteering since I was 14 years old. As you heard in my bio, I was in care, and the expectation was that every summer from the time I was 14 years old, that I had to work or volunteer. So I have been in the workforce, the labor force for a long time. I chose non-disclosure at first because, as I said, I just wasn't believed. I interviewed very well, however, and for a long time, every job I interviewed for, I got. The probation period, though, was always tricky after I got the job because I would always be perceived as a klutz. I'd be, kicking over the garbage can, knocking things over when I reach for them. But I learned throughout my life I had to absorb a ton of knowledge. I had to learn how to navigate environments when I could see well so that I could do them in lighting when I couldn't. So I never got fired from a job. I always made it through probation because by the time I got through it, I had figured things out. I had made my own wraparounds and my accommodations, and then I could do my job very well. Non-disclosure, though, hurt me in terms of ever being promoted because I was always still considered odd. Because, of course, every once in a while, I'd maybe walk into that wall, right? So even though I did my job really well, it hurt me socially in the workplace. I was not invited out to extracurricular things like with my coworkers, and I most often was really only engaged with in terms of work and with the job because I was always kind of considered weird. I'd stare at things, but it was because I was studying them so I could understand what I was seeing. Because for me, seeing was interpreting and figuring out what I was seeing. I couldn't just trust it like most people did. It wasn't just an automatic action. By the time I was in my late 20s, I became official. I was legally blind, and I decided that it was so hard to continue to navigate non-disclosure that I would try disclosure. I actually thought that was going to be easier and that I was ready for it after all these years of not doing so. And I was promptly terminated. Even though I had been in that position for over 2 years, I'd been training people. I'd never been promoted. I've been denied, but I'd never had a disciplinary action, and my reviews were always pretty good. But yeah, they weren't having that. I went back to school, and like Rome, I had always been fed this message of you get your education, your life will be easy street. So I went back to finish my university degree. I, like Rome, graduated very well, very high GPA, and I thought they are going to snap me up. And what I found instead was that employers saw me as a liability issue only. And I even had employers tell me directly that they would have preferred that I was in a wheelchair rather than have a visual impairment. And so the hierarchy of disability is really real in some people's eyes. And it led me to be forced to go on social welfare for over 20 years. I was on OW, and then when I finally found out about ODSP, I was on that. But my desire to contribute to society could not be tamed. And so I did volunteer in many sectors. And funnily enough, it was in the pandemic in 2021 when I first found full-time employment again. But my experiences, I'll share with you my negative experiences of disclosure. And that was that I constantly had to conquer the expectation that I would fail. And that is something that people with disabilities have to deal with all the time. And it affects our ability to ask for help and accommodation because we know that we're up against that. And that when we do ask for it, then we are met with the, I knew you couldn't do it kind of attitude. And so we seek to avoid that. The other thing is that people don't seem to always understand for us is that we want so much to be able to do things on our own and for ourselves, and that we're stereotyped with wanting help and wanting to be served by others, and that is so far from the truth. So I've also been accused of being prideful for not asking for help, and that is absolutely not true as well. I came up against being tokenized by disclosing. Some people and employers are really happy to have you there because they get to check off certain boxes and they kind of prop you up. And it can be really hard for us to know who is really genuine about us being in a place of work and who is not. Sometimes I know I could feel like I was being manipulated or used, but not really able to put my finger on it because everybody speaks nicely in soft tones and you can hear the smile in their voice. But deep down inside, you know that everyone is not for you. Um, Coming up against toxic positivity because of disclosure was another negative experiencing, and also having the ableism that you're experiencing minimized, being told not to make a big deal out of it, or, oh, well, the person said sorry. So, and then you're made to feel like you are the problem. And the one other thing I had from a disclosure that was negative was being told by a former employer, I did this for you. I bought this software for you. So being made to feel like you owe your employer because they have invested in accommodation. And that didn't go over too well and didn't last long. But I've also had some really incredible experiences with good disclosure. There are few, but they have been good. I've had employers who, right from the get-go, from the hiring experience, um, were really accommodating and asking for exactly what I needed in order to participate in the interview process. And then once I had the job, really maintaining, we've heard throughout these 2 days about the importance of relationship building and connecting and being open to exploring what needs for both people. Because sometimes I don't always know what I need in a particular position, but when I have an employer who's willing to journey with me and figure it out as we go along, that's just such a beautiful thing. Being put in a position of leadership and empowered to hold it and backed to hold it. That is so important because when you are put in a position of leadership, but you don't have the backing of your ED or your managers or supervisors, they're basically sometimes setting you up to fail. So it's been really great to have that experience. And it's been great to be supported. And when I have to travel for work, to have my support guide with me and having that coverage. So, and having my team. I love my team because my interdependence is so valued, in my current work at Realize. And that's something that I appreciate so much, is having the support of my team and not being made to feel like, oh, they're doing my job for me. No, they are supporting we're supporting each other in getting our work done, and everyone has their talents and are contributing that to the overall work. And I love being in a place where I feel valued and where I feel supported by my team, and where disclosure has been a benefit for me and not a hindrance. If there was something that I could impart to leaders to understand about the experience of employees with disabilities, I would ask them to suspend your disbelief. Um, when I would ask people, could you please just take 2 minutes? That's all I'm asking. 2 minutes to consider that what I am telling you about what I'm living with is true. And I could just see the transformation, because a lot of times people wouldn't consider, they would just automatically dismiss, an experience. But if you would absolutely take the time, even a short moment, to consider that what someone is telling you that they're experiencing and what they need is real, your approach will be different. Your tone will be different. The words that you choose to use will be different. And so I really, really want to impart to leaders to suspend your disbelief and to meet your employees with curiosity, with empathy, and with a willingness to listen. And I'll pause there because I don't know how much time I've got.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. The things that you mentioned are absolutely key to creating, building, and sustaining positive workplace relationships with people who have disabilities. Curiosity is so important in this. Thank you. I'm going to invite Rome, rather. I see your last name and suddenly have decided that's who you are. I'm going to invite you to tell us a little bit about your experiences of disclosure and what it's been like for you around employment.
Right. So I believe I mentioned a bit earlier in my introduction that I didn't realize that I had anxiety in a way that was very debilitating to me. So I have never gotten the chance to disclose my episodic disability. However, reflecting on the very few and far between jobs that I've had, which also kind of explains, is in line with anxiety as well. I've seen in reflection that there were many times where I wish I knew or I wish I had the language as a young person to advocate for myself, because I felt like I was really white knuckling a lot of jobs I was going through, like whether it was like working at Tim Hortons or like, making crepes or like working a desk job. It didn't matter really. And still, it feels like it doesn't really matter what the job is. The anxiety would always be there. And growing up too, like as a child of immigrants, that, you kind of have this mentality where, you always have to be strong, and you have to show that you have to show to your employer that you are grateful to be here. So you don't want to cause a ruckus, right? And, it took some time to unlearn that. And, I'm still unlearning that. However, I kind of had an experience recently where I saw my anxiety kind of like in full scope. And, given at this point, I have already accepted that anxiety is, or yeah, can be considered an episodic disability. So, I had a job at like a bubble tea shop. Very briefly, if you don't know what bubble tea is, it's kind of like it's a non-alcoholic drink. It can come in tea form or a milk tea form, and there's usually toppings that they put inside of the drink. So I had this job and they loved me, right? And like Ingrid said, like I do very well in interviews. However, after my interview and after a few training sessions, they decided to let me go. And this was really, it was unfortunate because I had been looking for some sort of stable work for 2 years. But on the flip side, I was glad to be let go because the manager who was training me was really triggering my anxiety in the form of like, his condescending tone, kind of asking me trick questions. And it kind of made me not kind of it made me feel like I didn't know what I was doing. So, I would be doing the same things that he would be doing and he would be critiquing me and kind of, it felt like he was very much setting me up for failure, uh,
Mhm.
no matter what I had done. So, I am glad that um, I I got let go from that job because I wouldn't want to be managed by someone like that anyway. But if I wonder if I had taken the chance to disclose my anxiety, if I would have gotten hired anyway, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of my experience with not disclosing my anxiety. However, I feel as though, um, as a current business owner and as someone who plans to employ others into my business someday, that I I hope that people feel that they can advocate for their disabilities because they see that my character is inviting and non-judgmental, unlike the manager at that bubble tea shop. So,
Yeah.
Uh, Absolutely. Thanks, Rome. Always good for a giggle. I'm going to have one question that I'm going to put to both of you. And then Ingrid, you can start with your answer, and then we will pop over to Rome. I would also like to invite the folks who are with us in the audience. There are over 250 of you, so it would be wonderful. Throw in some comments into the Q&A. Engage with our speakers. My question to you is, if you could make one change to hiring and accommodation policies in the workplace, what do you want to see?
I
What's the
would like,
big wish list? Go ahead, Ingrid. Sorry.
one thing that I would really like to invite employers to do is actually think outside of the box and bring some creativity and some newness into your procedures. Why can't there be video resumes by now? Why does it still have to be the same old, same old? Why can't we have job trials, job sharing? I'd really like to see some newness to the procedures. We keep hearing that employers want to know how to do things differently, but I think that a lot of times it just kind of ends up falling right back into the same status quo. So I'd really like to invite employers to really try um, doing something new and to um, I think really prioritize, as we've heard throughout the 2 days of the summit, to really prioritize that relationship building, that connecting with your employees, with potential employees, and to really looking, as we heard one of our speakers say yesterday, really looking at investing and supporting people to hold their jobs and to keep their jobs, and really valuing that as a way to actually build community in your business, and also to improve retention. When we look at supporting employees right through the whole life cycle of employment, that we'll see better results both for the employee and for the employer.
Thanks, Ingrid. I'm going to pass it over to Rome now. Same question. What's one change you'd like to see to hiring and accommodation policies in the workplace?
Right. My mind, when you asked that question, it immediately went to my personal belief that, these hiring and accommodation policies, a lot of the time they're built on the basis of money making, right? They come from, that kind of structure. And I would encourage people who are in the positions of power in these institutions to uh, it's really about an attitude, right? You have to decenter money. And I know that's like very radical for me to say, I guess maybe in this phase, but also like, as someone who is a new business owner, but not it's not my first time working with people. I I believe that yes, money can be the head of your business, but the people you work with side by side are like the neck. You know, they tell you where your money should go, and if the money needs to go to better services to help support them, in order for them to do their work, then that's not wasted money at all. Essentially, that is you taking care of the people who take care of you, right? And so, for myself, um, some of the changes I would like to see really, given I haven't been in kind of these formal settings, right, where these discussions are being had, but if I were to be in these situations or in these conversations, what I would encourage um, is to involve the people who these policies are supposed to help, right? So in this case, it would be people who have episodic disabilities, whether visible or not visible, and have them shape those policies in general and kind of make it like an open door policy where, if someone were to review my company's policies and were to say like, hey, like I was looking at this and I feel like, me and some other coworkers were having this discussion and maybe we would like to change that, I would be like, yes, of course, like I definitely want to change this if it makes you feel supported. And that's it's because I want to retain them because I know that they are good employees, but also good people as well. And something that I have come to realize, in understanding anxiety as part of my as part of a disability is that, just because you have this thing that's different than you, that doesn't mean that you are not worthy to be accommodated. Everyone who goes to work, who shows up at work, has the same common goal. They want to achieve the things that the business itself wants to achieve. People don't get jobs just to, do nothing, essentially, right? They want to contribute to something, And so, again, if you have the policies in place that accommodate these individuals, and whatever these policies ask for, that is not wasted money, it is not wasted time, and it is definitely not a problem to advocate for yourself. And if people are making it a problem, you probably don't want to be there anyway. So that's my advice.
Thanks very much to the both of you. I see that Steve has a hand raised, so if someone over there could make it possible for Steve to speak, that would be really helpful. Maybe. There we go. Steve, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to say, as somebody with a disability from birth, I have cerebral palsy and I use a wheelchair. Ingrid, you were the reason why I'm on this webinar because you did a presentation with the BC provincial government a month or so back, and so I didn't know anything about really anything about episodic disabilities and the variations of them before that presentation. So thanks very much. I also had a previous employer that made renovations in an office and then sort of held it over my head, like subtly, like I owed them because they took out a business loan to renovate the bathroom and all that kind of stuff. So my current employers, I have nothing but great things to say. But I did have a question for Rome. Based on your anxiety, is that one of the reasons why you picked running your own business, was because you can manage your own schedule? Because some people would venture to say that running your own business might actually be kind of stressful in certain situations. So I'm just wondering if you had thoughts on that.
Yes, I have many thoughts, Steve. Thank you for asking this question. Yeah, I think it's a two-parter where I grew up always knowing that a 9 to 5 job wasn't for me. But I also think it kind of sort of fell on me because of my anxiety, right? Like you said. And I think that I have to recognize that besides having like generalized anxiety, there are many more privileges that I have that I know that other people don't. And running your own business, I'm in a position where I live at home. I have to be transparent. I live at home. It's just me and my mom and my siblings. So that's kind of the privilege that I have, where I have to, I can, I guess, quote unquote, afford to make mistakes. Because, not saying that if this business venture didn't work out, like I want it to work out, but if it didn't, it's a little bit easier for me to go back to the drawing board and figure out what my next step was. You know what I mean? However, in saying that, though, when I was applying for jobs and I would interview, there's just something about, I don't know, there's just something about when people talk to me and then we speak with each other, they're always like, oh, you were just so close, you were just so close to getting the job. It was you and one other person. We decided to go with somebody else. And I'm not saying that like was related to my disability. It could have been other factors as well. Sometimes I think it's because of my youthful energy. Some people don't believe that that's professional. I personally believe that makes me exciting. but yes, I guess to round off my answer to you, Steve, it's choosing to run my own business definitely was in part of my anxiety, or a result of my anxiety, and managing different, I guess, like managing styles. And I don't, for me personally, having my own agency to do the things that I love, like that doesn't give me anxiety at all. However, that doesn't mean that I don't come in contact to that feeling ever. Of course, there's things like money in my mind. Where's my next project going? How am I gonna get another project, I think that I wouldn't encourage everyone to start their own business because it is very difficult. And not everyone has the privileges to do so. However, if you really believe that this is your dream to work for yourself, regardless of whatever disability or, whatever thing society tells you is holding you back, just do it, because you never know. You never know what your life could be like if you don't take the chances on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much, Rome. We are coming really close to the end of our session. It's 20 after 3 in Toronto at this point. So there are a couple of questions in the Q&A, and a few of them are really about kind of supporting disclosure. And I think this is a really interesting and important conversation for us to continue to have. The theme of our summit has been disclosure in dialogue, and that has been what we've been talking about for a couple of days. So Rome and Ingrid, if you have a few moments and you'd like to have a look at the questions, Ingrid, we can support you to get a sense of what they are, of course, and maybe pop in an answer or two because folks are really wanting to engage with you. Thank you, both of you, for sharing your story, for sharing your thoughts, and really for giving us a little bit of a sense of what some of these experiences can be like at different points in our careers. Ingrid is a lot more established than Rome is. Rome is just beginning. So it's been great to hear and see a little bit more about how things can go. And there are obstacles and there are challenges. And still, Ingrid has found a place that serves her and that works for her at the stage of her life that she's at. Rome, fingers crossed, you will also find this. Okay.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you both.